In the unfolding narrative of Jesus' life on earth, a particular question arises. Why did he choose Judas Iscariot, knowing well that this disciple would betray him? This quest for understanding takes us into the heart of a profound mystery, one that sits at the crossroads of human freedom and divine purpose. Let's step into the dusty roads of ancient Judea to explore the mystery of Judas, a man whose name would become synonymous with betrayal, yet whose selection as one of the 12 was essential to the story of salvation. In the early days of his ministry, Jesus of Nazareth walked along the shores of Galilee, through the towns and the wilderness, and wherever the soles of his feet touched, stories of miracles bloomed. The time came for him to choose those who would walk closely with him, who would learn from his teachings and carry his message to the ends of the earth. He ascended a mountain to pray, and from there he called his disciples, simple men of varied backgrounds, fishermen, a tax collector, a zealot, and among them Judas Iscariot. But why did he call these specific individuals? What was it about Judas that made him one of the 12 chosen? Did Jesus, in his omniscience, perceive the shadows that lurked in Judas's heart, and if so, why name him a disciple, let alone the treasurer of the group? In the Gospel of John 6:70, Jesus himself declares, "Have not I chosen you 12, and one of you is a devil?" It was not a condemnation made in hindsight, but quite the opposite. Jesus, identifying Judas as a devil, invites a reflection far deeper than mere character judgment. It challenges the very nature of purpose and destiny. Was Judas's role in the divine plan unavoidable, or did Jesus see a path for Judas that could have led to redemption? The answer is not laid bare in Scripture, leaving us to wrestle with the notion of choice and destiny and the role they play in the grand narrative of faith. A long time before Jesus walked the earth, there was a young boy named David who would become one of the most famous kings of Israel. He was known for his courage, like when he fought a huge warrior named Goliath with just a sling and a stone. David was also famous for his heart. He loved God deeply and wrote songs about his feelings, which we now know as Psalms. As a king, David made Israel strong and brought his people together. But his life was not all victories and celebrations. He made big mistakes, like taking someone else's wife and even causing the death of her husband. These mistakes caused problems in his family and his kingdom. Fast forward many years to when Jesus was choosing his followers. People still talked about King David, and they had a hope that a new leader would come from his family. This new leader, they thought, would make Israel a great nation again, just like in David's time. They called this future leader the Messiah. Now think about Judas. When Jesus chose Judas to be one of his close friends and followers, Judas might have remembered the stories of King David. Perhaps he thought that Jesus, who came from David's family line, would be a king like David, powerful and famous. Maybe Judas wanted to be part of Jesus' inner circle when Jesus became a big deal, like David was. So when Judas joined Jesus, he could have been hoping for the good times that would come when Jesus made Israel great again. But what was Jesus really about? Was he going to be a warrior king like David, or did he have a different plan? This question hung in the air, especially for Judas, as he followed Jesus and waited to see what would happen next. As Jesus spent time with the disciples, he did extraordinary things. He healed sick people, fed huge crowds with just a little food, and taught about loving others and God. But there was something heavy on his heart that he knew he had to share. One evening, while they were eating dinner, Jesus said something that shocked everyone. In Mark 14:18, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." The disciples looked at each other, confused and scared. "Who could it be?" they whispered to each other. "Surely not I," each one said, hoping he wasn't the one who would do such a terrible thing. But Jesus knew. He knew everything that was going to happen. He said that the person who shared this bread with him would be the one to betray him. Then he did something even more surprising. He passed the bread to Judas. This was his way of saying, "I know it's you, Judas." Why would Jesus do that? Why would he choose a friend who would hurt him? It's like he was playing a game where he already knew he was going to lose. But Jesus wasn't interested in winning games. He had a bigger plan, something that was hard to understand at that moment. Even though it was a tough thing to hear, Jesus was telling his friends that this betrayal was part of a plan that had been written about long ago. It was a plan for something good, even though it didn't look good right then. He was talking about prophecies. The prophecies said that the Messiah would be betrayed by a friend. So there it was, the truth laid out on the table, as clear as the bread they were sharing. But why? That was still a mystery. Would Judas betray him for money, for power, or was it something else? Jesus' calmness about the whole thing must have been puzzling. He wasn't angry or upset. Instead, he seemed sad, but sure of what needed to happen. It was as if he knew that sometimes bad things happen for a reason, even if no one could understand the reason just yet. It was now a time of great tension and distress among Jesus' followers. They were troubled, unable to understand the full picture of what Jesus had shared about the betrayal. Meanwhile, Judas was wrestling with his own inner turmoil. What drove him to consider such an act against his teacher, the man he had called Master? The air was thick with unease as Jesus led his disciples to a garden called Gethsemane after their meal. Here he confided in his closest friends, Peter, James, and John, asking them to stay awake and pray with him. The night was quiet, yet the stars seemed to echo the turmoil beneath their calm twinkle. In the solitude of the night, Jesus found a private spot, fell to his knees, and prayed with intensity. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. Luke 22:42. His voice may have been a whisper, but the heavens heard a son's plea. His plea did not come from fear, but from the weight of knowing what was to come, the pain, the sacrifice, and the burden of bearing the world's sins. Judas, meanwhile, was nowhere to be found. He had slipped away, driven by motives that have been long debated. Was it greed, as some suggest, since he was the keeper of the money bag, and had called what he saw as a waste of expensive perfume when a woman anointed Jesus? Or was it a misguided attempt to force Jesus' hand to establish his kingdom on earth by any means necessary? The other disciples may have been confused, but Jesus knew. He knew the heart of every man, and he knew what Judas would do. The scriptures needed to be fulfilled, as written in Psalms. Even my close friend, someone I trusted, one who shared my bread, has turned against me. Psalm 41:9. In this quiet before the storm, Jesus' struggle was not with the will to face what was coming. His struggle was for the souls of mankind and for the heart of the one who would betray him. Even as he faced his imminent betrayal, Jesus' love for Judas remained, a testament to the unyielding love he had for all, even those who turned against him. As the night wore on, the weight of the impending sacrifice lay heavy upon Jesus' shoulders. The disciples, overwhelmed by the weight of the evening, succumbed to sleep, unable to keep the watch they had promised. They did not yet understand that this night would be the last they would spend with their master before everything changed. In the quiet of the garden, under the veil of night's shadow, the moment of betrayal was drawing near. Jesus, after his intense prayer, returned to find his disciples asleep, weighed down by their own sorrow and confusion. He woke them gently. Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Matthew 26:45. No sooner had he spoken than the clink and clatter of armed men approached. Torches flickered between the trees, painting the scene with ominous light. At the head of this procession was none other than Judas. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Judas had given them a sign. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him. And stepping forward, he greeted Jesus with a kiss, a common gesture of respect and affection twisted into a signal of betrayal. "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" Jesus asked, Luke 22:48. His words not of anger but of sorrow, a final call to the conscience of his lost disciple. The kiss stung more bitterly than any blow from an enemy. It was the betrayal of a friend, the forsaking of love for whatever dark thoughts now consumed Judas's heart. Jesus, fully aware of the prophecy and the necessity of its fulfillment, submitted to the unfolding events, his authority still apparent as he addressed the crowd, questioning their approach as if he were a rebel leader. Peter, in a misguided attempt to defend Jesus, drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. But Jesus rebuked Peter. "Put your sword back in its place," he said, "for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." Matthew 26:52. With a touch, he healed the servant, a final miracle before his captors, showing that his kingdom was not one of violence, but of compassion. That night, the wheels of fate turned rapidly. The scriptures were unfolding as had been foretold. Betrayal and friendship, love and sorrow were woven together in these final hours before dawn. In the face of the greatest treachery, Jesus' response was one of healing and fulfillment of his mission. He embraced his path, one that would lead to suffering, but ultimately to the redemption of humanity. The disciples, confused and scared, fled into the night, leaving Jesus alone to face the trials before him. This was the beginning of the end, the start of a series of events that would forever alter the course of history and the heart of mankind. The act of betrayal weighed heavily on the land as the rooster's crow broke the silence of dawn. Judas, who had once walked beside Jesus as a trusted disciple, now stood alone, clutching the price of his treachery, the silver coins that seemed to burn in his hands. The Gospel of Matthew recounts the deep remorse that took hold of Judas when he saw that Jesus was condemned. Overcome with guilt, he attempted to return the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, "I have sinned," he declared, "for I have betrayed innocent blood." Matthew 27:4. But his confession was met with cold indifference. "What is that to us?" they replied. "That's your responsibility." Realizing his sin could not be undone, Judas threw the silver into the temple and left. Overwhelmed by shame and despair, he could not live with the enormity of what he had done. In a desolate place, he took his own life, unable to face the world or himself after what he had committed. The Bible does not explicitly record whether Jesus forgave Judas in the moments leading up to his death. However, Jesus' teachings consistently emphasized forgiveness, and it is within his message of unconditional love and mercy that many find the hope that forgiveness was extended to all, even to one who betrayed him. The heart of Jesus' message was love and forgiveness, extending even to those who sinned greatly. The fate of Judas is a somber reflection on the consequences of actions and the price of sin. The field bought with the silver he returned, known as the Field of Blood, served as a burial place for foreigners and stood as a testament to the tragic end of a man who lost his way. The story of Judas is not just the tale of a traitor, it is a cautionary account of loss, remorse, and the devastating effects of guilt that serves as a stark reminder of the need for forgiveness, both divine and self. While Judas's fate was grim, the overarching narrative of Jesus' life and ministry suggests a promise of redemption and hope for all, an invitation to reconciliation, regardless of one's past transgressions. The story reminds us that while one may stray far from the light, the path to redemption, though arduous, is never beyond reach.